up with 6 broad categories that characterize the activity in the new energy space. Well, we can see them there, but the groupings have been developed with a focus on where the core value is being captured, because of course sometimes a particular business model can straddle more than one, and there are interesting dependencies between them, which we intend to explore in future. Now, we could do a whole webinar around this single slide, introducing the 6 categories and discussing what we mean and examples of each, but we have issued a white paper and an accompanying podcast for this, which you may have seen via LinkedIn and via our website. So go to our website if you haven't seen that white paper and podcast. If all else fails, drop us a line and we'll make sure you get a copy. Instead today, we're drilling down just into one of these 6 pillars. So we're going to leave energy as a service bundling, time of use optimization, efficient consumption and lifestyle products behind, and focus on marketplace operation to give a view of how the research service works, focusing on one pillar. And essentially in this topic area, what we're seeing is a whole lot of innovation around the development of new marketplaces. They vary in sophistication from very simple switching sites to very sophisticated energy services environments. So let's drill down a little further.
Okay. Absolutely. So as Nigel has said, we're going to drill down into one of the 6 pillars that we've identified in this new energy space, so marketplace operations. And we've identified 4 subcategories within this. As Nigel said, moving from the more simplistic to the more sophisticated. So the first, which is the simplest and most common type, are marketplace price comparison sites. So here they focus on supplier switching. So it's effectively the most straightforward type. The provider typically asks for a couple of questions from the end user, from the customer, about their existing levels of consumption and the costs of energy. It then scans the supplier marketplace and then makes a recommendation as to the best deal that it believes the customer should switch to. So insofar as this is where the customer's experience ends, though. It's really primarily focused on this information and knowledge piece, which then leads to the second type of new energy marketplace, auto-switching services. And this is effectively an automated version of the first level with intelligent sort of simplification of the job of selecting which deal is best for the customer, and then crucially it automatically switches that customer to that deal. So it's really around the piece of improving convenience for those customers who are keen on switching their suppliers based on the best tariff that's available. On the technical side, this can range from relatively simplistic, so it's based on your monthly or your average bills, to much more sophisticated, where information from smart meters or optical readers is built in to capture a much more granular level of detail. And it's worth noting here that these auto-switching services are different from the comparison sites because they're able to develop this ongoing relationship with the customer. Moving to the third type, trading platforms. This is where effectively new environments are created that allow customers to directly match with generators, so consumers with generators. And it's effectively about minimizing or even entirely disintermediating traditional suppliers, as these platforms could eventually take their place. And this is where software platforms, they form part of the proposition that is now linking previously detached energy stakeholders together. So one neighbour to another neighbour, or a local wind farm to a primary school, or a famous football stadium or a celebrity to their fan base. It's all about the distributed generation assets being provided a route to market for their surplus power that they produce. On the customer side, though, it's also about the knowledge that they are supporting renewables or their local community. So there's lots of different dynamics that are working together in these trading platform spaces. And because you've even got sort of in the future the conversation moving on to the network operators and how they might be able to incentivize regional balancing to reduce the congestion that they're experiencing on their grid, or even to reduce the curtailment of renewable generation. So lots of new relationships, lots of different stakeholders across the market, and really enabling different interactions and transactions that previously simply haven't been happening. Which then brings us to the final and fourth type of new energy marketplace, which we've called smart markets. Now here, this is the most flexible and sophisticated level, but it's also the least common. This type of marketplace is much broader than the others because it allows a full range of services to be promoted. It's not just focusing on energy. That could be the beginning, the starting point, but it could be moving on to a whole wide range of different offerings that extend beyond the traditional sale of power, gas and heat. So this is where you can see here the other energy services and products on the left there with the green infographic of the distributed generation and consumption, but also moving on to the non-energy services and products and the plethora of different opportunities that exist there. So that's an introduction to the 4 different types of new energy marketplaces that we've identified. And it kind of gives you an overview of the different elements that are involved in that pillar. If we then move on to look at where we think the current state of the market is now, and then how we see that evolving, I appreciate this graphic is relatively busy for a webinar, but we wanted to include it because it's an extract from one of our reports. And really sort of simplifies and clarifies the message that we're trying to portray here. So hopefully it's relatively self-explanatory. On the left in blue, you've got the state of the market as we see it now. So you've got price comparison sites, which are more mature and more widespread in the top right-hand corner. And then you've got the other types of marketplaces that are in the more early stage embryonic state, with much fewer companies doing this approach in the left-hand corner. And what's interesting is the future kind of trajectory of these. So that's depicted in yellow here on the right-hand side of the slide. And here you've got how the business models are going to be evolving over time. So naturally enough, they move to the right, they mature, but it's the number of companies that are active in each of these spaces that we think will be really interesting. And so effectively, our kind of key message here is that we believe there will be many basic types of services, but fewer sophisticated types. So we only really see space in the market for a small number of successful smart markets, for example. To become this trusted go-to provider for such a large range of products and services, it inherently means that there can't be lots and lots of those go-to options. A dominant provider is likely to develop and kind of become the norm for customers. And then, so that's in comparison to the large number of trading platforms, for example, that we're seeing cropping up all across Europe, where we see lots of them coming up, but it's likely that a fair few will not be able to succeed, and we'll just see a few kind of key examples emerging. So this is kind of explaining, as I say, the current state and then the future market trajectory of this kind of new energy marketplace category. If we look at a couple of specific examples on kind of business models to watch, in the auto-switching category, for example, we've got June Energy, for example, in Belgium, and they are able to measure the real-time consumption of an end user, of a customer, with an in-home developed optical and analog meter that effectively reads the electricity consumption of the customer, so takes that granular data, compares the market, and then automatically switches that user to the lowest tariff. So the core benefit here really for the customer is twinned around the convenience piece, where it's quick and easy and hassle-free. It takes the work out of switching, but it's also saving them money. So ultimately they're paying a lower bill. Within trading platforms, an example here would be Luminatzer in Germany. So these guys have developed a software as a service platform for energy providers and for communities themselves to connect and balance renewable portfolios. And what's particularly interesting with this business model is their ability to focus on balancing supply and demand within the portfolio. And Luminatzer, they could trade this excess power on the market, but what they see really is that they would only really do this in an extreme situation, and they prefer to resolve these imbalances locally. And finally, an example of smart markets. So here we've got Smart Club in the UK. This is an online platform for citywide energy procurement, effectively. It's where various different businesses and different business models through Smart Club's provision of providing a space within which these energy users, data providers, local city authorities, utility providers, and so on, they can create projects that they want to complete. They can then open this up to the market for different stakeholders to respond to submit proposals, to make bids, and then ultimately to procure those services. And so we're now seeing this, be potential to be expanded beyond just purely energy products and services across, a spectrum of different possibilities. So that gives us an introduction and a sort of flavour for this new energy marketplace pillar. I'll now hand you over to Nigel.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. What we'd like to briefly look at now is, well, there's a tendency when you look at something like a new innovative space to think that the train's already left the station and it's not in it, that the opportunity's already gone, possibly, the big winners are out there. We don't believe that's the case, that there are a growing number of new marketplaces, this slide is at the top, and they're adding value, they're engaging customers, but we believe a killer app has yet to appear. Now, if I just explain what this slide's basically doing, Delta has built a proprietary method for analysing and comparing different business models from a customer perspective. The idea is to assess exactly how compelling or even addictive a proposition is for customers and plot that on the x-axis, and then consider the amount of actual value that's created for customers and plot that on the y-axis. We've carried out this process in some detail for 8 leading marketplace models and found that they largely scored pretty well, but without perhaps setting the world alight. We've graded them out here. But you can see there's a degree of clustering in the centre and just into the top right box, which is where you'd want to be, but without being in the far right corner, which is ideally where you'd want to be in a perfect world. So as I say, this analysis suggests that the killer app in the marketplaces space has yet to appear, and there is still time for new entrants to come along and build it. Let's move on to the next slide, Jenny.
Okay.
If we focus in on the way this analysis works, it focuses on different market segments. If we focus in on those, we've analysed in detail how the same 8 leading marketplace business models from different companies might work with 8 different market segments, or you can consider them as customer traits, if you like. So here are 4 of the 8 segments or traits that we've looked at. So we've sort of time-poor individuals seeking convenience or ease of use, the ethically driven segment focusing predominantly on climate, renewables and carbon, early adopters interested in trying out the latest new thing ahead of mainstream adoption, and self-informers looking to research solutions independently, probably with access to good quality data. There are also 4 other traits included in the service that aren't shown here. Now, once we've completed the detailed assessment of each of the 8 business models in the marketplaces category, we reviewed their appeal from the point of view of the 8 customer segments. And we then plotted the results on a matrix and built a profile of how well served the different market segments currently are. So we'll now have a more detailed look at the two highlighted categories, time poor and early adopter, on the next slide. This is just a table drawn from the marketplaces pack within our research service. Again, we've grayed chunks of it out, but each row on the chart presents one of the 8 companies that we've been talking about, with the scores revealed for the 4 customer segments what we've just been looking at. So a score of 3 in a green cell highlights where the company in question is providing a compelling proposition to a segment. A 2, an amber cell, highlights a neutral proposition, and a 1 is a negative score, really, implying that that business model holds little appeal for that segment. So anyway, if we concentrate on the early adopters and the time poor segments, we can see the early adopters are very well served by the current innovations, with a wide range of appealing and novel innovations providing an extremely competitive environment for this segment. But by contrast, the time poor are relatively poorly served by the range of offerings that are currently available in the market. Now, I suppose you could conclude that's typical of a developing market where new products are likely to still contain a few wrinkles and not properly been productionized for mainstream users. Nonetheless, it's clear this might still represent an opportunity, and when you consider that many of the products here were originally designed to make supply switching easier, it's perhaps surprising to see that so few have scored highly for this segment. Okay, moving on then, one area that we do think offers a lot of scope to address the needs of the time poor and other convenience seekers is auto switching that Jenny was talking about. And as we've noted already, auto switching remains a relatively new innovation and in our view will be an important growing opportunity for a number of years.
Yes, thanks Nigel. So with that kind of introduction to auto switching again, and kind of bringing that up in correspondence to customers who are time poor, as we can see on this slide, which aren't necessarily being served as well as we might have expected, we thought we would just run a quick poll to kind of gauge your industry view on auto switching and the impact or the kind of customer response that we can expect to see, for example, in 5 years' time. So what we've done here is, I'll just launch a poll, but effectively the question is, in your market in 5 years' time, what percentage of customers do you see using an auto switching service? So do you see that? So let me just use the thing here. So launching the poll. So that should have come up on your screens now. And you should be able to select an answer. Yep, as people are doing, fantastic. So do you think that it will really remain quite a niche opportunity? Oh, hang on. Nigel, can you see the poll here? Yes, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's left... I'm not sure if the right poll has... Oh, okay, so I think I've just launched the wrong poll, the poll on blockchain.
Yeah, you have, yeah.
Right, okay. So I'm just going to close that poll and open up the right poll. That's a bit of a shame. Hang on a second. So if you just bear with me, let's have a look. So here we go. Okay, right. So here is the poll that we meant to launch. In your market in 5 years' time, what percentage of customers do you think will be signed up to an auto switching supplier service? So we've got the options of very low, so less than 10%, or 10 to 25, 25 to 40, or over 40, really looking at kind of more of a mass market opportunity. So we've got about 60% of people have voted so far. Fantastic. It's tied between two of the options at the moment. So I'll release the results of the poll in a second and show you what they are. but if we can have the last couple of people voting, we've now reached nearly 80%. It's very neck and neck between two of the options, the first two options, so the less than 10% and the 10 to 25%. If the last couple of people would like to cast their votes, and I'll close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fantastic. Okay, so just share those results with you, and they should be up on your screen. So as I said, here we go. The results of the poll, very interesting. We believe that it's neck and neck between less than 10% or 10 to 25%. So what we've also done is reach out to the customer panel that I mentioned previously about customers kind of propensity to engage with auto switching services and kind of their appeal. So I wanted to share some of that insight with you. Okie doke. So here we go. Here is the appeal of auto switching energy services that we found through our work on our Heat Insight service. So with this customer panel that I mentioned previously. And when we asked them the question of, would you be willing to engage with and kind of subscribe to an auto switching service that you have to pay for, what would that appeal be? And we found that it would be reasonably high. We found that around 10% of customers would be would find it very appealing, and around 30% more would find it quite appealing. So that shows around a third of the market would be indicated that they would be interested in potentially using a paid-for auto switching service. We then asked everyone, what would you feel about a free auto switching service, and how would that influence your appeal? And the results were really interesting. Naturally enough, the appeal increased because it was free instead of paid for, but it actually rocketed. So you can see here that it rocketed to over 70% of customers who we asked found that the appeal of using an auto switching service, if it was free, that they would be interested in doing that. So it really shows that the response from the panel shows that these customers are interested in this type of business model, and which could be a relatively scary prospect for some of the energy stakeholders that we've got in the market now. If customers are able to not only receive all this information but actually have someone else act upon it, relatively immediately. So that's the kind of auto switching topic. We're now going to move on to discuss blockchain, the third element of what we said we would speak about today. So Nigel, I'll hand back over to you.
I'm not sure if this is the same from everybody's point of view. I'm still looking at a quick poll here, Jenny.
Oh, right, okay.
To move on there.
Let's have a look.
I'm not sure.
Okay, hang on a sec. Okay, so hide the poll, and then audience view. Okay, so it should go back now. The software and hide the poll, and then the audience view.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Okay. So unfortunately, you will have missed the slide that I was just presenting about with regards to the customer panel research, but that will be shared.
You want to just bring that up, Jenny?
Yeah, I'll see if I can.
I just wonder if it's working.
Yeah, I wonder if I can go back. Hang on a sec. Not sure if the software allows you to go back. Yeah, okay, here we go. So what I was saying here was the paid for option. You can see that that's reasonably high appeal for the 10% and 30% of customers voting very or quite appealing. But if you go on to offer it for free, that rockets up to the 70%, and really the vast majority of the market indicating that they would be interested in engaging with a supplier auto switching service if it were available to them. So sorry about that, everyone, but those slides will be available in the pack, and feel free to ask us any questions if you want any sort of clarity around those slides. But Nigel, I'll pass back to you on the blockchain.
Thanks, Jenny. Okay, well, it's hard to run a session like this without at some point talking about blockchain. It's an important new technology which we spent a lot of time looking at Delta, and which we believe could have transformational impact in the energy sector in future. But as you can see from our Dilbert cartoon, it's also clear that a lot of people don't really understand what it is and how best to use it right now. In our view, it remains too early to say what the full impact of blockchain on energy will be, but some initial emerging models are very interesting, with the marketplaces category representing a natural starting point for peer-to-peer models that could disintermediate suppliers, such that energy users are connected directly to generators of their choice, such as and models like that. We'll come on to one in a minute. Lo3 Energy in New York, Power Ledger is another good example in Australia. However, peer-to-peer is an idea whose time has come anyway, and it doesn't necessarily need blockchain. If we look at SolShare here, who are based in Dhaka in Bangladesh, that piggybacks on two things. Firstly, on the huge rollout of PV in Bangladesh, and secondly, on the mobile phone financial network Bcash in that country. You might be familiar with M-Pesa in Africa. Bcash is very similar. Instead, anyway, but blockchain must show itself to be the best possible solution for any particular business model. It's not a business model in its own right. Thus, when we talked to SolShare in Dhaka, we found that they'd rejected blockchain as it wasn't suitable for their peer-to-peer market, who had an immediate affinity with Bcash. Another thing we should stress is there's a sort of tendency to look at blockchain from within the energy sector and say, how can we use this? And another way things might change is that there are some very interesting new business models emerging within the highly fluid cryptocurrency space, which could yet migrate across into the energy sector. It doesn't follow the energy sector will come up with the best applications of the technology. It's just as likely that an exciting new killer app could evolve outside of energy and transition and morph laterally into the sector at a later stage. Anyway, blockchain is an evolving story. Here at Delta, we're keeping a special focus on it, but we do believe the best business models are yet to be developed. So it'll be interesting to see the first early stage experiments develop and change. If we move on, Jenny.
Yeah, absolutely.
To the next slide.
So is there Lo3 Energy slide come up?
Not here, no.
Okay, and that should have. So a little bit of technical difficulty. It's
struggling with technology today.
It's showing up on my screen, and it's now gone too far. So I just need to double check what's being shared. Show screen.
Yes, that's okay. Lo3. Thanks. Okay, so I've mentioned Lo3 briefly. They're quite high-profile pilot in Brooklyn, New York, is really too interesting to ignore. It focuses on residential and small business energy consumers and prosumers in that community. There's an entire website about it you can go and read about. It's got a strong community orientation. When we interview them, it's clear they have a vision for a peer-to-peer microgrid that they can port from one city to another, potentially on the licensing model, where Lo3 becomes license holder in a series of city-owned microgrids. They're not microgrids in the strict sense, but they're kind of logical microgrids. The strong community aspect of this model develops customer engagement, that we remain to be convinced that the copy and paste stream this implies will be as replicable as all that. Many aspects of the Brooklyn trial look, well, site-specific, though that might be just because it's the first time they've done this. So they might struggle, at least initially, to roll out their model far and wide, but it's certainly a captivating notion. If I hand back the baton back to Jenny.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll now launch the second poll that we meant to launch. So apologies about the confusion there. But we think it would be interesting to gauge people's kind of opinion on the kind of the next steps, or the prospect of blockchain and the implications that that's going to have to the energy industry. So the poll that we've got here is to ask, what proportion of customers do you think will be using blockchain to support some form of energy trading or some form of transaction in 5 years' time? So let me just launch that poll. Okay, so let's have a look. And does everyone see that poll? No, not yet. Okay. So I'm just going to launch the poll. So
it's visible now.
You can you see it now? Great. Okay. So you should be able to answer the question. Yes, as we can see, some people are doing that. Perfect. So do you think that no one will be using it? No one's going to be using blockchain to share or trade any of their energy? Do you think that it's going to remain a relatively niche kind of proposal and less than 10% of people will be? Or do you think it will be gaining traction and kind of more of the market will be using it? Or do you even think that the majority of people will be using it, and over 50% of people will be using blockchain in 5 years' time to share and trade energy and transact in that way? We've got 75% of everyone's voted, so that's fantastic. Thank you. I'll just leave it open for say 5 or 10 more seconds, just for anyone else who might want to vote. We've got a clear winner though, which I will share with you. So let's close the poll now. So we'll close that and share the results. So it's very clear that less than 10% has been the preferred option for people selecting in this, and yeah, I think we very much agree with that. It's incredibly difficult to say, and especially when you put a time frame on it and say 5 years time, what proportion of different customers will be engaging with and using blockchain. So thank you very much for that. Then that brings us to the end of the 3 sections that we were covering today. So looking at the different innovations within new energy business models, in specifically the marketplace operation category, and delving a bit deeper into what subcategories and what different types of business models are involved in that space. Having a look at the customer piece and why are customers engaging with the different business models, which key traits or behaviours are those business models attractive to, and then finally this blockchain piece that Nigel summarised for us here. So just to wrap up and bring us back to where we started, we had these 6 different pillars that create the framework and the way in which we are analysing this space of new energy business models. That, as Nigel said, we've looked at literally hundreds of different business models, and there's more being created all the time, coming to market. So we've presented this kind of piece around this one pillar here. We've just finished looking at the time of use optimization pillar, which has been particularly interesting. That's a very active and topical space at the moment as well. And we'll be doing the next pillars in turn, having a look at which, fleshing out the remaining 4 over the next sort of 3 to 6 months. But do feel free to let us know kind of which ones take most interest for yourselves. It'd be interesting to kind of hear your feedback and opinions on the way that we've framed this and the different business models that are coming around within each of the different categories.
Jenny, do you think you could put up the slide of the 6 business models? Still looking at the poll again.
Oh, right, okay. Let's hide that.
Yeah. That's it, thank you.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, so this is back to the 6 pillars in the frame. And yeah, explaining that we've looked at today at the marketplace operations, and then we've spent some time looking at the time of use optimization piece, and we'll be taking each of the 4 in turn over the next 6 months, as I say. And then even this sort of extent of work is really just the beginning. We've mapped the landscape, we're understanding all the activity. Once we've done that, it's going to then get even more interesting, understanding how these different business models are doing, what's working, what isn't working as well, which customers are interested in which different business models. So yes, we've got lots to do, lots more to talk about. And oh, sorry, Nigel, go for it.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, hopefully we only talked briefly there about marketplace operations, but hopefully it gives us a sense of the type of insight we're developing. But we do anticipate holding similar webinars that continue to look at new business models as we proceed through the 6 pillars. So do stay with us. We're also starting to see relationships between the different pillars. Some can enable others, some are dependent on each other, and so that has implications for things like investment planning in innovation programs, and we're also spotting particular opportunities so that you can say, well, hang on, you know, there's 4 or 5 particular standout short-term opportunities across the piece. But you know, how do they sit within an overall strategic plan such that you can build a no-regret strategy for innovation program rollout?
Absolutely, absolutely. Fantastic. Okay, well, just looking at the time, so that's 1:15, which is perfect. We've kind of scheduled an hour. Appreciate that's a long time, so we tend to kind of try and keep these sessions relatively on time and succinct. So if we move to the questions now, and having a look at the ones that have come through, I'll just have a quick look at the different questions. And Nigel, are you able to tap into the questions as well?
Yeah, just let me have a look. Feel free to tap away, anybody.
We've got
the question here.
Go for it, Nigel. Sorry.
Well, there's one here around how business models evolve, and can you move between different marketplace types? Because we talked about four marketplace types earlier, and the answer to that, I think, is yes. Different marketplaces do evolve. I think Jenny gave an example of that during the presentation, where she talked about how price switching sites often evolve into auto switching sites, and we're seeing something of a rush as people try to do that. But of the 4 types of marketplaces we identified, if you recall, we talked about simple price switching, auto switching, and then more advanced types that were that disintermediated suppliers and added new types of products in. We found that those relationships, the transition between layers, isn't necessarily linear. So while level 1 price comparison leads to auto switching, level 3 trading platforms tend to originate as a standalone activity. You've come at it from a different angle. We do expect to see some level 3 trading platforms evolve into level 4 full-blown smart markets, but we've noticed too that smart markets too can be originated as a starting point, which could even incorporate the lower levels. So yes, there is a degree of evolution, but at the more advanced levels, there seems to be a need to make a strategic decision up front to go in that direction.
Yeah, okay. That's good. We've got quite a few questions on the other pillars and kind of defining them in a bit more detail. So yeah, absolutely appreciate that we weren't able to kind of go into any depth there. As Nigel said, we've got the white paper and the podcast that go into it, but it might just be useful if I kind of briefly summarize what we mean by each of the 6 marketplace operations that we've covered today. So hopefully that's kind of come across that that's all about transforming the way in which stakeholders are kind of connected and the transactions that occur between them. It's really about that marketplace as opposed to you know, the products or the services that come within that marketplace. The time of use, so that's effectively about business models that are leveraging value from flexibility. So here you've got examples of demand response, storage, using distributed generation at specific times, so turning it on, turning it off, flexing that capacity in response to a variety of different values, or monetizing that in different ways. The efficient consumption pillar, that's around the effectively around data-driven approaches and using data analytics to identify different ways in which either the residential customer or primarily as the commercial and industrial customers, how they can improve their consumption and effectively become more efficient. The bundling, that's all around combining different service packages together into a single proposition. So where you've got several different utilities, utility bills, all packaged together into that single combined offer. That's what we mean by bundling. The lifestyle products, that's effectively where we're focusing on the quality of life piece. So as opposed to looking at the financial side of things and kind of what's going to save you money or what's going to make you money, this is really around the peace of mind, comfort, and as I say, yeah, this quality of life and the experience the customer is kind of exposed to. So a lot of the examples there would be connected homes devices. And then finally, the energy as a service business model. So that's where effectively the business model is moving from providing a product, so that one-off transaction or a product or appliance, and it's moving towards that ongoing relationship with a customer and developing several touch points over an extended period of time. And we're finding we're sort of yet to flesh all these different business models out, and as I said, we've looked at 2 of them, but that's kind of an introduction and overview of the other 4. So hopefully that helps.
Okay, I've got another question here around the types of customers who are being targeted by the different marketplace models. I don't know if it's possible to bring up the slide. Is it generally showing the 4 categories of marketplaces?
Let's have a look. I can go backwards.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's quite a long way backwards, I think. Essentially, so we've got, yeah, that's the one, isn't it? So essentially, we've got 4 types of marketplace with quite different characteristics. So types of customer targeted. Well, I mean, looking at it sort of simplistically, without getting too much detail, essentially price comparison and auto switching are largely dominated by B2C models. We are seeing 1 or 2 interesting B2B price comparison models appear, probably simply because it was a rather glaring gap for quite a while. So 1 or 2 recent innovations have filled the B2B gap there. Trading platforms and smart markets tend to be a mix of B2B and B2C. So it's a much more complicated picture. There are some clear B2C opportunities here, but B2B is quite appealing as well. Sometimes we've seen some CSR type interest in where corporate social responsibility companies that wish to act responsibly, but we think this is a much more complex picture. In fact, another big strand here that I should mention as well is the strong emphasis on community. Okay, so but with both the trading platforms and the smart markets, there's a strong element of community orientation, and the rise of localism plays into this, and so you could end up with C2C markets, and in fact we are starting to see that. So somebody who may not be as interested in say green issues may be more interested in localism. So green issues here is more important than green issues generally. So I think we could in future see C2C models start to emerge at levels 3 and 4.
Okay, fantastic, Nigel. There's a question here, Nigel, about the solar sharing company and scaling up, and
Right.
whether we. So I think the question is, what's the plan for this for the solar share company scaling up? Do we know any more details around that? Is that something that we're able to answer?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I do know a bit about this. Essentially, what they've done, a bit like Lo3, is they've concentrated on getting one model. They spent a long time getting one model right in one location, but they've been very opportunistic, very pragmatic in their approach. Well, without getting into a lot of detail, their solution piggybacks on a particular problem that applies in that country, where essentially it's a pay-as-you-go model that applies for PV, and there is a widespread problem in the country with people attempting to steal, if you like, their PV usage, and so they provide their solution initially as a lock to PV companies built into a meter. So it's I don't want to get into all the detail now, but essentially it's a two-step process. Essentially they're fixing a tactical problem that the PV companies have, and then building that out into their full solution as a second phase. They do not intend to have their own installer teams, because what you have is widespread PV distribution companies in Bangladesh already. And so they intend to, their customers are actually the PV installers. So if they can convince enough of these PV installers to take their solution, fix this problem to do with locking meters, and then piggyback the pay-as-you-go solution, then that will be their strategy, and that will stop them having to have installation teams all over the country, because they'll be able to use the installer network that's already there in the PV company. So they'll be able to keep their staff down. I think they've got something like 25 or 30 staff in their office in Dakar, and they don't envisage that becoming, thousands. It might go up to 50 or 100, but they're able to leverage those existing installer teams.
Mm. Fantastic. Okay. Probably just have time for one more question. There's a question here on auto switching, and how does it work if you've got different types of tariffs? So if you've got 100% renewable tariffs versus regular tariffs versus other ones. So when we were speaking to some of the different companies that are doing this, that's effectively one of the options that they're building in to give customers the option to select different criteria, or to define which types of, for example, supply that they would have either a preference for, or they want to kind of eliminate from the different criteria that are used when the algorithms work out the different comparisons, and then work out what's kind of best to use for them. So that's one of the capabilities that I believe some of the auto switching services are thinking about, and are wanting to be able to offer the different customers. And there's also another question from the auto switching. I've just lost it now, but it was around if people are moving house, and if they don't inform their auto switching provider. So that's certainly, that's certainly a good question. Not one that I'm sort of able to give an answer on now, but definitely something that we've also highlighted and can kind of and look into. I think that probably brings us, nearly bang on past. We should probably let most of you go now. But that was a really interesting session. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll definitely feel free to get in touch with us if you've got questions. We'll be sending out the slides for the webinar and also the recording once that's finalised. So that should be the end of today. As I said, do feel free to get in touch with us, and we'd like to kind of follow up with some of you as well. So do expect that to come. But thank you very much, everyone, and I hope you have a good day.
Yeah, thanks very much. Cheers.